Well, welcome everybody here, and welcome Jessica. I'm Arne. I'm founder of Banking One, and totally psyched about data as Jessica as well. Jessica earned a PhD in astrophysics from Berkeley, and today, instead of finding patterns in the structure of the universe, she spends her time finding patterns in the behavior of people in order to make technology work better, she wrote. So, Jessica, did you find any patterns in the universe that are similar to human behavior? I don't know, discussions in Slack are similar to supernovas or something like that?
Well, when I say that patterns in the universe are similar to patterns of humans, I mean it more on the actual way that we organize data. So when I did my PhD, I had a large data set of quasars, stars, galaxies, and they were multivariable objects, so objects that had a lot of different pieces of information attached to them. And similarly, humans of Slack are, in our data set, objects that have a lot of information attached to them, whether it be their location or the type of teams they're on. And so from a data perspective, they're really just objects with a lot of different variables, and you're trying to understand how to cluster these objects into different types of either stars or galaxies or types of users. And so while the variables are very different and the behavior is very different, in both you can use these objects to try to infer information about the world around you.
Just a quick question. Who knows Slack in the audience? Perfect, perfect. Good audience for you, but still a few people out there not using Slack or not knowing Slack. So can you, in 2 or 3 sentences, tell us what is it about?
From a user perspective, a lot of people would describe Slack as a way to chat with your coworkers. We like to think about it as something broader than just a chat or application. The way that we use Slack at Slack is really a way to collaborate and a central place to organize all of your work. And so I most closely partner with our platform team, which is the way that we partner with other organizations to allow you to integrate different tools within Slack. So you might be using Slack for talking to coworkers, but you can also import your email into it and read your email, or you can launch code from Slack via Git. And so we have a lot of ways that you can really centralize all your work into Slack. So we talk about it as a communication hub, a centralized place to put all of your internal communication within an organization or a team.
Before you worked at Slack, you told me you worked at many other companies, always as a data scientist. So from that perspective, what's kind of similar, a similar pattern, in all these companies when you joined or worked there?
So my first job out of graduate school was at Yammer, which is another communication tool for enterprise. We were eventually acquired by Microsoft. And then I've also worked at a small education startup where we were creating a space for getting online tutoring via a kind of Skype-like interface. And I also worked for a company called Hired that helped people find jobs. So I would say that the uniform thing that has been true about all these organizations is that data is very messy, and it's incredibly hard to translate from the raw things that your users are doing on your product to insights or actionable things that you can do from that data. I was especially surprised when I joined Slack. considering it's such a large organization and has so many users, how hard it was to answer some of the most basic questions with the data. And I think actually the larger your organization is, the harder it becomes to keep your data organized and to allow different parts of your product to talk to each other. So it's very important from my perspective to be very forward-thinking in the way that you're organizing your data systems, to hire people who can do data science or do data engineering early on in your startup process so that you can have that foundation that's very strong, and as your company builds, you can utilize that customer data and use it for product decisions at scale.
We at a later point go into what you're actually using on these tools, but first, what's your role at Slack?
I am an individual contributor data scientist. I partner with our product teams and the product managers and product engineers to help them make decisions. So I sort of think of myself as an internal consultant for the product team. People will come to me and say, hey, we're noticing that we have this change in the way that people are using this aspect of the product. Can you help us understand it? Or we're getting a lot of customers complaining and calling up customer support about a particular problem. We're not sure exactly how that's manifesting itself. Can you help us build a system that will monitor that and help us fix it? Or even, we have these two ideas of a direction that we could go with the product and we're not sure which one to prioritize. Can you help us build a model or a forecast to decide which one would be best to invest in the coming year? So those are the types of decisions that I help the product leaders make, and the types of ways I use data for product development.
And you're also in the how to show data to management, so the visualization stuff, right?
Right, and so there's several different aspects of how I work with teams. So one is building the systems to take raw events of data and organize it in a way that it can be quickly analyzed. The second is to partner with people and come up with insights or research areas to pursue. And the third is to So the first is more of an infrastructure, data infrastructure. The second is like a research or data insights. And then the third is more on the reporting and metrics. So creating systems, dashboards, reporting tools, so the rest of the company can regularly monitor things that are going on within Slack, and start making goaling and decisions and around that data, so that I'm not the bottleneck, that they don't have to come to me every time they want to know a piece of information, but they can look at our reporting or our standardized sets of metrics.
And then that's company-wide, right? Everyone can look at
Yes,
these
everyone
KPIs.
can look at it that has, that's an employee of Slack.
Oh, cool. Talking about these KPIs, what are like the core KPIs you're going to in Slack?
So my philosophy and the philosophy of the data science team at Slack is that you want your metrics to be something that is simple enough that you can create a story around it. So if you have a metric that is so complicated that, yes, it might be changing over time, but you don't really understand what drives it, or you're not able to create a logical explanation for how that metric is manifesting itself, that's not great of a metric to use for product development or for business strategy in general. So something that's simple and kind of easy to understand, but also you want something that is stable enough that it's not going to be moving all over the place from week to week. So you can correlate some improvement or thing that you're doing within the product or within the business strategy with that metric improving over time. And instead of it just kind of wildly moving all over the place. And then the third is you want it to be something that is you can influence with changes to your product. So at Slack, for instance, we care, of course, about getting people to start paying for our product. So we have a freemium version of Slack where anyone can create a team and anybody can use Slack for free. But we make money and we sustain a business by people deciding to pay for Slack and get more premium features. And so that's something that we care about. However, a team might use the free version of Slack for many months or years before they end up paying for it. And so that's quite a long sort of time. It's hard to influence that metric because things you might do in the very beginning of someone's experience at Slack, you won't see the payoff for many months if that's your primary metric. So we also care about things like growth within the team, usage of individuals in Slack. So a primary metric is having at least 3 people who are engaging in Slack on a team in a given week, and also at the individual user level that someone has hit Slack 3 days within the last 7, because we believe that if Slack is going to be really effective, you want people of the team to be visiting it on a regular basis. So those are engagement metrics that we care about, and also a financial metric that we care about.
Three times out of 7 days a user needs to be using Slack. How do you come up with this specific number?
So some of it is initially guessing. Say, we think that this is important. We think that 3 days out of the past 7 is about the right level of engagement that we think is reasonable. But then we also test different metrics, and we say, okay, well, what if it's 4 out of the last 7 or 7 out of the last 7? How stable is that metric? How easily can we influence that? Is it something that captures the overall or standard usage of different people using Slack? There are metrics that we try and they work for a while, but as Slack changes and our customer base grows, they don't make sense anymore. But I think it is important so it's important to experiment and try different things and see what makes sense given your product and given your customers. But then also at some point make a decision and centralize so that the entire company is sort of going in the same direction and not all trying to optimize on some metric that's localized to just one team or one particular part of the product.
Who's deciding on this specific metric, like the 3 out of 7, or if you come up with a feature and so on and so forth? What's the process there?
I support the platform team, which is the team which looks at the way that we integrate different apps and integrations into Slack. And so, for instance, if we are coming up with a metric specifically for platform. The process is the leads on the platform team, the general manager, and the product leadership will have questions about, well, how are different teams using integrations and apps, and generally want to look at the landscape of the data. And then we'll present that to them and come up with some different measurements, and then also recommendations around these are how certain metrics look over time. These are metrics that are stable. These are metrics that are not. This is how this particular event or product change influenced a metric. And then that becomes a discussion where together we collaborate and build consensus around what is the right thing to centralize around as a team. So it's really a collaboration of both the product leadership and the engineering leadership and the data scientists based on historical data and looking at the numbers that we're seeing today.
You obviously build also features which are not based on pure numbers, like for PR value, or someone, CEO has a great idea. I don't know how it's in Slack, but yeah, I'm guessing it's also that feature comes into the roadmap. And how and when do you decide that's a good feature and let's stick with it, or nah, it's influencing something we totally did not expect, and therefore we need to backroll that, and yeah.
So we do run experimentation and A/B testing at Slack, so that's when you ship different versions of Slack to different sets of customers, and you see how that influences their behavior. And that is used in the product development process, especially at the top of the funnel or the growth part of the product. So if you're trying to influence signups or establishing of Slack teams, we use a lot of experimentation there. It becomes a little bit harder once you have an established team in the product, because you don't necessarily want to give a paying customer an experimental feature that could then later get rolled back. And so that's where we have to be a little bit more careful about when we use experimentation and when we drive product changes based on customer feedback, relationship with customers, vision from leadership, and what we sort of logically know is a direction philosophically that we want to take with the organization. And I think it's hard to create that balance of being data-driven and using experimentation, but also listening to your customers and having a point of view and taking risks and taking bets based on what you believe is right for your product. And so that's a conversation between leadership and the data team and our customer engagement and account management to try to come up with that right balance. Slack does tend to be more vision-driven than some of the other organizations I've been at. For instance, I know that a lot of the people on my team come from Facebook, and Facebook tends to be much more driven by experimentation and data, but that works because it's a consumer product. I think it's easier to do that when you're a consumer product. When you're an enterprise product and when there's a lot of more team effects and influences of customers on each other, it's a little bit harder to be as data-oriented and run tests and experiments all the time for making product decisions.
So that is like the feature is vision-driven, but what do you do if let's say revenue, we want to improve revenue a couple %, so, and that's your goal, and now you have this huge amount of data and you actually have no idea what to look for. So what's your process there? How do you like go into the data and look for things? What you don't actually know what you're looking for. So how do you come up with?
Yeah, so that type of work would be more around the insights part of my job. So where we have some high-level questions about how we can improve the user experience or inefficiencies within the product, but we don't know what we don't know. And so we tend to have about 30% of our time as data scientists reserved for general data exploration and trying to understand ways and actually derive strategy from that data exploration. So for instance, right now, I'm really interested in how the size of teams impacts the number of people that interact with each other on Slack. And I'm doing some research on how we can expand the connectedness of a team as it grows, and what are the optimal ways for teams to talk to each other at different scales. How that will drive profit for Slack is not yet clear, but I'm hoping that by generally understanding how connection scales, we'll be able to drive different product initiatives that will form more efficient communications within organizations.
Okay, cool. You told us it's a lot of like collaborative work with different departments and so on and so forth, and I'm guessing it's for many people in the audience it's always the same. Do you have like some tips to become a more data-driven company, like in a specific meeting, like you have a meeting and you're saying, yeah, this experiment is so and so, and we need to come up with KPIs, and then we test it, and someone says, nah, I don't know, I'm totally, I know this will work, and let's put the resources in that feature or something like that. Do you have like some concrete?
So I think it helps if everyone within the team has access to the same set of data to begin with and can have that influence their point of view on what's going on in the world. If different people have different sets of information that they're using to drive their point of view, then that can create conflict. So we try to make accessible data from not only product usage, but also from CE tickets and from account managers, so that when people are making decisions, they have all those different point of views. Now, of course, everyone has their lens and their specialty, and they might interpret that data in a slightly different way, but at least that gives everyone the same vocabulary to be sort of coming at the problem with that same language. That said, I don't think that data is the be-all, end-all, or always the correct solution. It is important to follow intuition sometime. It is important to listen to customers and use particular scenarios to help influence your point of view. So for me, I really see data as a way to support other pieces of information that people have through their personal experiences, through their history, and through their interactions with our customers and users.
What tools are you using, like in your daily routine?
So our data is on a Postgres database that we use Hive and a few other kind of back-end tools to crunch the data and get it into Postgres. On top of that, we have several different visualization layers. So we use one that we've built ourselves. We also use Looker. We use something from Airbnb that they have developed, and I'm forgetting the name of it right now, Superset. And so those are tools that allow you to query the data and then build visualizations and dashboards on top of it. When I'm doing more statistical analyses and modeling, I'll pull data into Python and do more analysis there. And then we'll build specialized tables in Airflow if we need a data set that isn't currently available. And then there's also like the communication aspect of it, putting things together in PowerPoint, and sometimes Excel is the right way to send data to someone if they're not a more technical person, but they want to have some access to the raw data.
Okay, and you told me the visualization stuff, you built your own, right? Why do you do that, and why don't you use like a standard product out there?
So it's interesting. We're right now in the process of evaluating whether we want to keep using an internal tool that we've built ourselves or move to Superset and Looker, which are either proprietary tools or open source tools. And I asked this question because I wasn't at the company when this decision was made. And it was a combination of having some very specific needs for our data that were not easy to implement on tools that existed, and having the bandwidth for data engineers to build that tool internally. But now we're finding we have the opposite problem, that we need functionality that is available in these publicly available tools, and we don't necessarily have the resources or want to prioritize building our internal tool. So we're kind of deciding whether or not to move away from that. I think there are positive and negative aspects to both, and we're actually making that transition right now, or making that decision right now as an organization.
Cool. So, are there any questions? The mic is over there. Here is a question I see, but
I was wondering, I used to collaborate with Facebook Research, and you were mentioning Facebook, and what they do is that they do a lot of qualitative research to understand their customers, and they travel also to different countries to understand cultural differences. So you were talking a lot about data, so I suppose a lot about quantitative data analysis, but how do you learn about the why of the customer, why they have certain behavior?
Right. I should have mentioned this earlier. So I'm on the product data science and research team. And so we're actually on the same team as user research and user experience researchers. And we also have survey data scientists. And so there's a lot of collaboration between the product data scientists and the researchers to try to say, okay, well, we see this pattern in the data, but we don't really understand how to interpret it. And then they'll go and interview different users or survey different users and try to understand, well, why is this thing happening? And how can we create more of that story? And it's been amazing symbiotic relationship to both drive insights from these logs and this raw data, and then interviewing users and understanding their story. So if at all possible, when you're developing your data science strategy, I think it's really great if you can partner that team very closely with user research or experience researchers.
Lutz Limburg, I'm product owner at Xerix Markets, a fintech marketplace. And I'm interested a little bit into the reporting line of your team. So you said that you are also doing exploratory work. And when you found some insights and you understand that there should be some initiative established from there, how do you trigger that? Who do you report to?
So one of the challenges I've found at going from a quite small startup, my last company was about 100 people, to Slack, which is 2,000, is that a large part of my job is not only doing the data crunching and getting the result, but then convincing the company to do something with that. And so we spend about 20% of our time road showing results. So socializing it with lots of different teams, trying to get their input in what they think is going on, using that to synthesize a point of view, and then eventually showing that to our product leader, our company leadership, which has a monthly summit with all of the C-levels and VPs, where we can then present information to them. So it's kind of a spiral up, where we start at lower levels and then kind of work our way up and get more and more information till then we can kind of say a more complete picture with that influence from other stakeholders to our executives. And then at that point, they can either do nothing with that or decide that the research means that we should take some new direction or reallocate resources. So that's how we sort of do it at Slack.
Perfect. That was awesome. Thank you very much. And thanks you all for your participation.
I'll be here all day, so come talk to me.